So, you know how to put decals on, but what about freehand? Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, time for another back to basics video for you, and in this one we are going to cover freehand. Now freehand can be quite a scary prospect, especially if you've done a really nice job of painting your model and then it comes time to the freehand and you think, well, I don't want to ruin it. But in this video I hope to give you some tips and some tricks and some ideas on how to paint freehand. It's not as difficult as you think. Now as always, these videos are aimed for beginners. I really hope it's useful to you. So let's have a look at freehand. Right, okay, so let's have a chat about freehand. Now in the last video we covered decals, so I want to sort of continue on from there really, I think, first. So we're going to have a chat about decals, in particular doing shoulder pad symbols, which is probably the most popular decal that we use, and then how to do freehand on that. So I'm going to show you some bits and pieces that I've done. I'm going to run through some tips and tricks that I've used to help me with the freehand, and then at the end of the video we're going to have a go and do some freehand on camera. So the first thing I want to say is about paint and paint brushes. So one of the key things to doing freehand is to make sure that your paint is nice and thin, so that when you do your design, any work that goes down on your model isn't thick. So what you don't want to leave is like raised lines. It's better to do 2, 3, 4 very thin little coats of very thin paint than it is to do one thick coat. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the brushes, which let me just move that to the side for a second and zoom in. Now obviously it does depend upon the size of the actual freehand that you're doing, but these generally are the two brushes that I use. So I use a 000 brush, which is a very, very tiny pointed brush. And then I use this brush. Now this happens to be a Games Workshop Artificer Layer brush. This is the XS one, which is one of their smallest brushes I think they do. Now this is a slightly older brush, and what I've actually done on this one is I've cut, I don't know if you can see this on the camera, probably not, but I've cut the tip of that off, so that I've got a nice flat tip. Now the reason why I did that, I couldn't find a small brush that actually had a flat tip. If you can find one, then fine, but I couldn't, so I just made one myself. Now having a flat tipped brush is incredibly useful, especially when you're doing designs like, just show you this one, like this. So on my dark elder here I've got this sort of foreign writing, and having this nice big flat tip here was just so much easier to give me these sort of square edges. Now yes, I could have done it with this brush, but it definitely would have been a lot harder than having this flat edge brush. So that would be my recommendations, to have a flat edge brush and a pointed brush to start with. Right, okay, so let's have a look at decals. Now I'm going to focus here mainly on my Space Wolves. So my Space Wolves have a unique symbol on, and this is their decal sheet. Now this decal sheet is very old, and as I said in the last video, it's probably not really going to work very well. This decal is about 10 years old or so, and I've only just started painting the Space Wolves. Plus, I really wanted to test myself with the model, so I went for freehand on the shoulder pads. Now this was the only reference material that I had, and because it's got a sort of white moon, which you can't really see on the actual decal sheet itself, as opposed to using the decal sheet for reference, I went hunting on the internet and I found a picture of the decal. Now it's not the highest quality picture, but it's good enough for me to do some freehand. So as you can see, I enlarged the picture, made one big one, and I also did a small one just to reference up how it looks small. And then I actually used this as my reference to paint the actual image itself onto the shoulder pad. And the way I did it is I started with the red, a nice thin coat of red, as I said, and I just laid down a basic shape, and that's the key word here, basic. So on our Imperial Fist decal, for example, we've got the actual fist symbol, and of course it's got the circle going around it. Now the circle is obviously going to be incredibly difficult to freehand, so my suggestion would be to simplify that design and probably just not do the circle, so literally just focus on the fist itself. And I think that's key really, is just to try and simplify but still maintain the actual image itself. So again, on the ultramarines here, probably just do the ultramarine symbol but ignore the circle, just take that out. Just make it as easy for yourself as you can when it comes to doing the freehand, especially obviously if you're quite new to it. Obviously if you're an expert and you think that yes you can draw the circle, then go ahead. So going back to my wolf, so yeah, I started painting that on and this would be the result. So let me just bring this guy in. So there you go, that is the result. Now I simplified the design. This section here, I obviously tried to get this little jagged edge in because it's only 3 little jagged edges. This section down here, I totally ignored all these jagged edges and I just did like a little circle around that little area just to keep it simplified. And although I did try to put in some little teethy sections here, again I didn't go for like 4 teeth, I just put a couple in just here. Now it's quite small, you probably can't see it, I am on maximum zoom. But yeah, that was the results, very happy with that. So then that's just one guy. Now imagine you're painting a unit of 10. Now this is another hot tip for you. Okay, you've got your design here, you've put it onto the one shoulder pad, now it's time to do the second shoulder pad. Okay, bin this, bin that. What you want to do now on your second model and thereafter is base the freehand on what you've already done, not on the original design. It's far easier to copy what you've done than try to copy the original again. The chances are you might get better at doing the original, but then you're going to have an uneven look of your freehand symbols. And that's exactly what I did. So when it came to doing the second one, I actually copied my design on here. Now it's never going to be exactly the same because after all we are human. It's never going to be exactly the same, but you've got a much better chance of getting a nice consistent symbol on a unit of 10 if you copy yourself rather than copying the original. Okay, so that is the shoulder pads talked about. Next I want to talk about simplicity, or potentially doing your first freehand, because I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing shoulder pad symbols first as your first ever freehand. It certainly wasn't what I did. I'd pick something a lot more simpler. So what I'm going to pick next to show you is my Dire Avenger X Art. Now this was one of the first guys that I actually did any freehand on at all, and that was on his flag. So he comes with this little flag. Now I wanted to definitely do something on here freehand, but I wanted to keep it as simple as I could. So I just went into the codex, I found the most simplest image that I could, which was this sort of Dire Avenger head, and I just mapped out the shape. So I started with a white undercoat on this, which obviously made life a lot easier, and I just basically drew in the shape. When I say drew, painted in the shape with a very, very light thin coat of blue, built up the shape, and once I was happy with it I then filled in the rest of the blue. I left this white stripe and put purple at the bottom just to give it a little bit more detail, and then I'd used a wash and I just washed in the blue section with a blue wash, and then I washed the white with a grey wash just here because you've got this like groove going in. And that's my results, and I'm very happy with it. It gave me a lot of confidence that I can do some sort of freehand. As I said, it's very basic, it's very simple. That's exactly how I'd recommend you start. Don't pick something which is far too complicated to do, because you're going to very easily get disappointed and very easily give up, maybe never do freehand again. So start with something simple, something to get your confidence going. Now there are a few additional tips and tricks which I just want to cover quickly now, but I have covered this before in a previous video which I am going to link up in the description below. It's called How to Paint Freehand, funnily enough. But yeah, one of my key tips here is before you paint on the model, to do it on something else instead first. So that would be a test model or even just paper. And one of my biggest tips is to take your design and to cut it down into quarters. So for example, on this shoulder pad here, what I would do is draw a line right the way down the centre here, and then draw another line right the way down in the centre here. And that will give me, if I can just bring something in, it will give me quarters, something like that. So what you would do is take your line and actually paint this section here first to try and give you that quarter. You then maybe would move over to this quarter. As you can see, doing it in quarters splits down the design into very easy manageable sections. So this one here, now obviously you'd be able to see what you've done here and match it up. But I think you can get where I'm coming from. If you take this quarters here, it makes that design look a lot more simpler, and it's easy to map out your design. Now I covered this in a lot more detail in that video, and in that video I am painting this, which is where we start to get to a slightly more complicated design. I might have to zoom out a bit here. Right, here we go. So yeah, it's still what I call a flat design. In other words, there's no 3D effect on this, but I have done highlighting. But yeah, basically I've drawn in this design. It's obviously a Klingon symbol. I've got two on top of each other, one upside down. Really happy with it. And as I said, I've got a video of me doing this design in the archives. Check that out if you're interested. There's a few tips in there, quite similar to what I've shown you, but you can see me physically actually doing all of those tips. Right, okay, so now we're talking about more complicated freehand. So I'm going to just show you one item first. So I'm going to show you this guy. Now this is where I'm at really with my freehand at the moment, where I'm just starting to try and introduce more of a 3D effect. Now I'm sure you know him already, but 33 Clay Dog is probably the most awesomest freehander on the planet, and he has a YouTube channel, so go and check him out. I will put a link to Clayton's channel in the description below. Head on over. He's a really nice guy and an amazing painter. And this design that you see on here was copied from a design that Clayton did for me on one of my jet bikes. Again, I'll put a link to his jet bike in the description below, and indeed that video will take you to me actually painting some of this, and again doing some tips. You can see me painting this on paper first, etc., before I go on to this. And I don't know if it's picking it up on the camera here, but in this freehand I've introduced shadowing, and again trying to make those tentacles just pop off of the background as such. Right, okay, so that's that. Right, now I just want to quickly show you a couple of pictures of some freehand of a model that I did for Commissar Gamza. I don't have the model because it's obviously he's got it in his hands, but you can check out his video of him receiving it. Again, link in the description below. Right, here's a couple of pictures to show you. Right, okay, so as you can see there, I painted an American eagle on that shoulder pad. Now that was probably one of the most complicated designs that I've done so far really, but I've got a hot tip for you in painting complicated designs. Now it does mean you'll need some form of photo editing software, but I can tell you it made my painting of that eagle so much better. So what you do is you take your image, which you find on the internet, that you want to put onto a shoulder pad. Now this isn't the exact image that I used, but it's a similar image, as you can see. Now I'm using Photoshop Elements to do this. I think I'm using Elements 11. It's a good couple of years old. But what you do is you put your image into Photoshop Elements, and then you go into the, bring this down, go into the filter selection. If you go down to filter gallery, and it will take you to a set of options what you do is you go down to this one here, watercolour, and it will turn your image into this, effectively into paint strokes. Now it's far easier to see the shadowing and the paint marks here than it is on this one. Now just to zoom out. Now I'm not sure how it's coming out on the camera, but from where I'm sitting I can really see individual stroke marks of the painting here, and the different colorations as well, and that is a lot easier than to see this. It just looks like feathers, but this you can actually see the paint marks, and following this to paint something more complicated is a lot more easier. So that's one of my hot tips. Put it into a photo program of some description, change it into a watercolour, and makes life a lot easier. Right, okay, so I'm going to move on now to actually doing some painting on the camera. Right, okay, so this is our Imperial Fist, where obviously in the last video we put decals on his left shoulder, but I've left his right shoulder blank, specifically to do some freehand work. Now as you can tell, I like to plan my freehand a lot. The reason for that is I don't consider myself an artist. I consider myself a good painter, and I consider myself good at copying things, but I don't necessarily have that artistic flair. We were talking about Clayton earlier. You could give him a blank canvas and he could come up with his own really cool design and actually put that image from brain to paper. Now I can't do that, but I am really good at copying things. So I find personally, if I plan well, I can do a good job. And that highlights obviously where everyone is different. So you need to find your own technique. You could be one of those people that just gets your shoulder pads and think, oh right, I'm going to paint fire on that, and just get your brush and you start painting fire and you're really good at it and it works really well. Other people's might have to do a lot of research on the fire. How does the flame look? You know, where does the yellow go? Where does the white go? Where does the red go? And actually research that quite heavily. So you'll have to find your own feet there. But certainly for me, pre-planning is one of the key things to doing good freehand. So on this guy, I've decided I want to do something quite unique with him, and that's the beauty of freehand, to make your models, make your army, or even just one character look unique. Now yes, I could go in and I could just paint a little arrow symbol or something on there, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something which I don't think probably anyone's ever done before. Now this guy here, he's going to be quite talented, not only at fighting, but he's going to be quite talented at music, in particular playing the keyboards. So I thought it'd be really cool to have a keyboard of some description on his shoulder pad. Sounds weird, doesn't it? But bear with me. As I said, I'm just trying to make this model quite unique. So what I did is, first of all, I started searching on the internet, searching clip art. In particular, I was looking for PNGs, not JPEGs, which we'll come to in a minute why I looked for PNGs. Now I wasn't too worried if I had the watermarks and stuff on there. This is only just reference material. Now there was a lot of different designs, and I took my time working out which I thought would be better. Now in actual fact this image is this way up, but in my mind I was envisaging it this way. I thought it might be pretty cool to have this running alongside the bottom of the shoulder pad, almost like an arrow coming up, but this time you've got a keyboard coming up. So that was my image. So what I then did is I found a flat picture of a shoulder pad, which was this one here, put this into Photoshop. I put an image of my model into the Photoshop, and then I just, using a dropper tool, I just got the colours of the yellow and the red, and then I filled in the shoulder pad here, just so that I basically had that coloration on the shoulder pad in Photoshop, because I couldn't find an Imperial Fist shoulder pad. Once I had that, I took this image, which as I said is a PNG image, so that means it takes all the background out. When you drag it from this picture onto this picture, it's almost see-through. In other words, you only get the actual piano itself. So I did all that, and this is the result. Just there. Now I'm thinking that's going to look pretty cool on my shoulder pad of this guy. So, now obviously that is quite complicated, and we're going to go back to what I said right at the beginning of the video. Keep it simple and keep it basic. So although now I have my full concept of exactly what I'm going to do, I'm not necessarily going to do this full piano that you see here, because it's going to be very difficult. But what I am going to do is I'm going to take a section of that piano and do as many keys as I can. But I'm not too worried about that at the moment. For me, the first thing to do is get the shape down. So I want to get this wavy shape, get the white blocking in there, and get the other wavy shape, and give me that bass. Once I've got the bass done, I can then start putting in the lines of the piano and just see how many I think I can get in there with the paintbrush that I've got and the size of the shoulder pad. So I haven't planned that far ahead, except I know I'm going to do it a lot more basic than this. So now I have my concept, and as you see I took a lot of time with that, but I think it's going to be worth it. We now need to put that concept onto the shoulder pad. So let's get set up and we're going to do that. Right, okay, so let's see what we can do here. Now I'm going to do as much as I can on the camera, but as always I do find it quite difficult to paint in this position. It's not my normal painting position. But I will do my best. I might end up having to do some off of camera, but we'll just see how it goes. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to do the top wavy line just to lay out the sort of end point of the actual freehand. So I've got my black paint here on my palette, and it's, as I said, it's nice and thin. So let's start. So I'm going to go about halfway up. Now I'm going to try and stabilise the model so it doesn't twist on that pin that I've got. So I'm going to do a little angle up and come down, and then we're going to go up again like this. So I'm just mapping out. As you can see, I've got the wrong shape there, but that's fine. We're going to cover that up. As I said, I find this really difficult on camera. Hopefully the camera's picking everything up okay. Right. So that seems about right. So I'm going to mirror that at the bottom. Probably not going to talk too much because it's difficult talking and painting something so intricate. Right, just bring that to the edge of the shoulder pad on this side. Right, so I think we've got quite a nice basic shape there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to fill in the middle section. Now I'm going to start off, I'm not going to go straight in with white, I'm going to start off with a Space Wolves grey. So again, I've got some watered down paint, and I'm just going to paint in this middle section here. Okay, so that's the first layer. So what I'm going to do now, the most important thing here at the moment is to do that white stripe. So I am going to let that dry, and I'm going to do 2 or 3 layers of the Space Wolves grey and just build up a nice even coat. So I'm going to do that off camera and then I shall be back. Right, so that's that Space Wolves Grey filled in that middle section. Now I have gone over some of the black lines. That's not a problem because we're going to re-black those in. Those black lines are really just guides of the shape as such for this piece. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back over that Space Wolves Grey but with white. And again, a nice watery mix just to make sure we don't get no harsh lines or anything. So yeah, I'm basically just going to go back over this but using the white paint instead. So now we've got that grey down, the white should go on quite nicely. We will still need a few coats of this just to build up the colour, so I'm just putting a rough coat on first. Right, so I'm going to let that dry, and again I'm going to do another 2 or 3 coats just to build up that so we've got a nice block of white. So I'll be back when I've done that. Okay, so that is the white actually blocked in now. And once again, I've gone over the black lines. That's not a problem because, as I said, that's just for the shape. But what we are going to do now is we are going to block in the black. So again, I'm going to start off at the top here. So we're looking for, just getting our little image, we're looking for a nice sort of even black line basically going across there. So let's see if we can do this on camera or not. Gonna be interesting. Right. Start off thin. Try and paint in the same direction. And just thicken up that line. At the bottom, I'm literally going to black in the whole of this bottom area here, and again use that line, the guideline that we have, just to come to the edge. Okay, I'm going to finish this off camera and I'll be back when it's done. Right, so there you go. So I blocked in the black there and just tidied it all up, and it's looking really neat and tidy. I'm really happy with that. So the next stage is going to be to put in the actual lines, just the stripy lines going down, which are going to indicate obviously the piano keys. So I need to get them as thin as I can and as many as I can in there. So I'm going to have a go at doing that. I'm going to try it on camera. I'll probably have to take it off the camera, but we'll see how we get on. Right, so I'm going to try and position this if I can. It's really, really awkward, so that I can get my brush, here we go, and just do a line going down. So let's have a go. Okay, so I'm just doing it without any paint on first. Just gauging the size of these keys. Right, so I'm going to paint actually onto the black, and then I'm going to cover the black up later, and I'm going to use grey rather than black, I think, on here. So I'm going to go back to my little grey. The reason why I'm doing that is I'm looking at the image and that actually looks like grey more than black. So a little bit of paint on the brush, and let's see what we can do. So I'm going to use the edge of the shoulder pad to indicate the line. Just paint a little line down there. Now Let's see if that's going to be dark enough. Don't think so. I think I'm going to use, let's have another look at this picture. Definitely is grey. I think I'm going to use a darker grey though, so let's get some darker grey out. Okay, so I've got some Dawnstone grey now, which I think will help it a little bit. Now, I could go in with black, but I think the black might be a little bit too harsh, especially when I start putting in the other keys that are there. So let's start that again. So a little bit of paint on the brush. And let's do a line. Oh yeah, that's better. Now we might have to do some touching up at the end of both the white and the black. Okay, so that's starting to really take shape now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish doing the lines going down all the way across. Then I'm going to go in with the black and the white. I'm just going to tidy up the lines as much as I can. And once I've done that, I'll be back. Right, I think that's about the best that I can do. Obviously we're dealing with lots of straight lines and also dealing with a curved shoulder pad and a squiggly pattern. So it's going to be quite difficult to get this absolutely perfect. But I think it's good enough for me to move on to the next stage. And the next stage actually is the last stage. And that is to put on the other keys, which we're going to do in black. So the keys are 2 space, then 3, then space, 2 space, 3 space. So that is the pattern that we're going to be trying to achieve. So I'm going to start at the back here, and I'm going to aim. Now once again, it's going to be tough on camera, I think. Try and do some of these on camera. So we're aiming. Now I'm going to use my other brush actually here. Right, so I've got this brush with the flat edge, and this is really tough to do in this position. Let's see if we can get a better position. So I'm going to take him off the cork for this, just so I can get in. As you can see, I'm struggling to get comfortable. Right, here we go. I think I've got it now. Right, so we're going to aim for this area here. Now, it's just over halfway up. One. Just tiny amount on the brush. And if even then I might just put it onto my nail just to make sure I've not got a big globby bit. One, two, and then we have a space, and then we want 3 stripes. So we've got a little space, and then we're going here. Space. 1, 2. 3. Right, I'm definitely struggling to paint this on the camera, but you get the idea, hopefully. Come into the light a bit more. Right, I'm going to go off the camera, and I'm just going to continue that and try and get it as neat as I can. Right, there you go. So I have finished. So I went in, tidied up those little black keys, and then afterwards you could probably see there I've put in an additional little grey line. Now that wasn't on the original design, but I felt it needed it just to finish it off. When I was visually looking at it, I thought it's just not quite right. So I put in that little grey line just underneath the keyboard there, and I think that just really finishes it off nicely. Now, it's not perfect, as I said. Freehand is never perfect, but it looks really cool. I'm very happy with that. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was useful to you and you got something from it. Please comment, like, share and subscribe if you're not already. Don't forget to hit that bell button next to the subscribe button so you can keep up to date with the wonders of Warhammer 40k, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.